like to welcome Bobby Vaughn from a Call to Actions podcast on here. We're kind of teaming up here on this. So the topic today is UFOs and Operation Silverbug. What is up, Bobby? How you doing, man?
Hey, not quite recording on my end yet.
That's all
good.
But
I'm doing great. Feeling fortunate. It really is, being able to do podcasts at this point in history when you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. I feel very, very grateful. And it's really awesome to be here with you, Chris.
Yeah, today's promise. Tomorrow's not so much.
Yes, sir.
Well, they say today's promise, like you could only get like half of today. You never know.
I'm at work, doing normal day job because podcasting doesn't pay unless you're Joe Rogan. And I'm wondering, man, is that helicopter, is that an enemy helicopter or is this a military helicopter? You never know what's going to go down these days. You never know if there's going to be an EMP, a flying saucer invasion. You seriously never know.
Do you have a bird?
No, I thought I would leave the window open a little bit. So let me
I thought you had a bird. It sounded like a bird. I thought, oh man, you got a little cockatiel. You got a huge cockatiel in your room.
I have part of that.
What you told me packing. You're packing.
I'm packing some documents here that I wanted to talk about. We've been wanting to do this for a few weeks now. It's so in depth, though there's no way we're going to be able to cover this in an hour or less. We'll do our best. I have some bullet points here that I want to talk about, though. But first, I'd like to start with Project Silverbug.
Absolutely. Let me give a quick description of Silverbug real quick?
Yes, sir.
All right. Project Silverbug, this is off of MRU.com, the Silverbug Project. Did they really use alien technology to create a UFO? Yes. Division of the United States Air Force made certain declassified reports publicly known. They included the Silverbug Project, which focused on the creation of a military flying saucer. And Silverbug comes from, if you look at a beetle, and if it's silver, it kind of looks like a little bug, like a little tic-tac. Also known as the United States Air Force Project 1794, or Whiskey Sierra 606 Alpha, Project Silverbug was created by the Air Force for one purpose: to create a foolproof flying saucer. To do this, they hired a Canadian company based in Ontario called Aircraft Unlimited. Thus, they began the creation of a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft to reach a maximum speed of more than 3,000 meters high. Pretty freaking cool. And
they wanted to. They began this project after the Roswell crash in 1947, but we'll talk about the older flying saucer patents as we get into this. But really, kind of the United States interest, especially the Department of Air Force, the Air Technical Intelligence Center out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, was very interested in Project Silverbug and working with the Canadians, the AVRO or AVRO, the AVRO project.
So just to clear things up, this is just to clear things up now, if you're looking at documents, guys, and I'm going to put the links in here in the description, there are literally dozens and dozens of aircraft designs on how they're going to make it. So is this reversed engineering, or is this something that someone, they just watched Mars Attacks and they're like, okay, well, we can do that. So this is something that they got from Roswell, information they got or is this, you know what I'm saying? Is this reversed alien technology, or is this something that we created? Because reversed alien technology would be altogether different than from something we created. It would be something we wouldn't see on our everyday runway at your local airport, right?
Well, yeah, I'd have to say, particularly in this project, I think the idea came from advanced aircraft that human beings have been witnessing for thousands of years. I think the idea came from that, but the actual project actually used wind turbines as a lifting mechanism to attempt to bring this off of the ground without having to have a runway. And, some of the earlier projects, I'm not sure when helicopters were created, but, that's an example of a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, or VTOL. And that's going to be important when listening to this, because VTOLs, or vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, that's what we're talking about. Yet in this sense, we're talking about disc-shaped VTOLs or saucer-shaped VTOLs. See, in 1955, Air Force's Intelligence Center was very interested in proposing the idea for this as not only a war machine, but also just really in the beginning, just first you have to start from the beginning, a blueprint or a proposal.
Right. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but you did mention no runways. So there are a lot of benefits to the creation of this UFO technology, whether it be reversed or just created from scratch. And like you said,
absolutely,
no runways, unless it's for long distance. We really don't need runways. I mean, we have helicopters, converted planes, that use vertical takeoff. All this vertical and VTOL aircraft, it really doesn't need a runway. But some of the benefits would be like outmaneuvering, stealth, fuel reduction. And, in fact, they're using jet fuel. Maybe they're just using water. There's like literally dozens of these aircraft designs. So the type of fuel may vary, and it looks like some just may use airflow for its vertical ascent.
Absolutely. And one big part of this, I mean, you're looking at, the U.S. was interested in what the Soviet Union was doing at the time. Soviet Union was interested in what the U.S. was doing. Of course, a big spike in technology was going on. And if I can read, I'll read from this Air Intelligence report here.
Oh, please do.
Based on the above conclusions, I might read those conclusions. A twofold intelligence program is justifiable. And this was a commander out of the Air Intelligence. A, the technical information on this project should be followed by direct liaison between Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the air technical personnel. Okay, and then B, a collection effort, and this would involve the early CIA guys. A collection effort should be initiated to determine whether the Soviet bloc is or has been conducting research efforts on a similar project when this work began, and the present state of the Soviet development. I'd really like to see those records. I would like to see what the Soviets were doing back in the 50s.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Who wouldn't? I mean, time sensitivity, right? We want to develop this for the other guy, kind of like Operation Lusty and Paperclip, where Lusty was the snatch and grab of all the military equipment, and Paperclip was the, they would bring in all the Nazis to help out and try to get us ahead. I mean, even the one of the people back in the 50s and 60s, they were von Braun. He was a Nazi. We brought him in here and was like, hey, how about you take over NASA? And you know what? He did a good job. He did a good job. I mean,
he was over the rocket propulsion, the early rocket propulsion experiments back in the day. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting how NASA, if you're German, you read it, it's like saying Nazi. But they wanted this thing to get up. We're talking about the Project Silverbug, as most people know as the Avro car. They wanted it to get up to thousands of miles per hour and be able to reach heights of a few miles in the air. But we're speaking on the factual technical data that was proposed in 1955. For what they considered this is important. These designs, which can be classified as radical aircraft designs, and they wanted to correct any distorted pictures that people had, because early sci-fi movies were coming out, alien invasions, flying saucers taking over entire cities and or countries and putting national security I'm not a nationalist, but putting the national security in jeopardy. If you could imagine the psychological effect that a fleet of flying saucers would have, the psychological effect would be much greater than Pearl Harbor. You know how they snuck in Pearl Harbor?
Oh, sure.
They just completely wiped them out. You know, if Japan was to come over or China was to use one of their patented flying saucers that are capable of, there is a Chinese patent. It's tough to read because I don't read Chinese. The proposal for the patent, they actually received the patent in China for a true all-terrain vehicle, one that's capable of hovering over the surface of Earth, one that can go into the air and also be used for space travel, but also can submerge itself. I mean, talk about submerge itself, and we know about USOs, or unidentified submerged objects. Well, we may have identified potential leads for where some of these, the ones that are being made by humans, are coming from, because these are true all-terrain vessels that are capable beyond amphibic, of dipping down into oceans, going down into,
I knew it,
bases, true all-terrain. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, it's really exciting to think about, but it is
so top secret that, you know, even the sailors on the ships that watch these aircraft come out of the ocean, they're like, okay, that's a UFO. What they don't realize is it's probably us.
It very much could be. Very much could be. I mean, because these patents are going back. The oldest patent that I've found so far is called the Discopter. They filed for the patent in 1944 on January 1st and actually received the patent on June 5th, 1945. This is 2 years before the Roswell crash. It's called the Discopter. And I want to read. It was the inventor is Alexander Wagers. The drawings, the original drawings for this, are just really cool to look at. I just want to briefly read a little bit of his description for this 1945 flying saucer, which he dubbed the Discopter. Quote, "My invention relates to wingless, heavier than air flying craft, whose outstanding example until the time of the instant invention has been the helicopter." So he received his inspiration from the helicopter. "To a helicopter, a craft constructed on the principles of my invention bears a superficial resemblance in that both types are sustained by at least one horizontal rotor or ducted fan, right? From this point on, however, in 1945, all similarity between the two types of the flying craft ends. A craft embodying my invention is distinguished from a helicopter in that the rotor or rotors of my craft are enclosed within a substantially vertical tunnel. The rotor, regarded as a whole, is main shaftless, and the external from the craft is not very different from the familiar discus of the athlete. You know, discus that people play?
Yes.
He's talking about like the earliest example of a discus-shaped aircraft, at least in the United States. In common with the craft, it enjoys certain aerodynamic advantages, characteristic of the passage discus through the air, more like a flying pancake. Right, burnt pancake. Not only the rotors, no, you can't get to IHOP on a flying pancake either. Not only the rotors and the power plant compartments, but all the usual moving and fixed protruding parts present in both airplanes and helicopters, such as stabilizing, and I know this sounds boring.
No.
But hold on. You have to be a scientist to even know this. Stabilizing and directing means and otherwise are entirely enclosed within the strikingly simple and cleanly streamlined contour line of the craft. When regarded from exteriorly thereof in any evaluation view, thereby concealing from the casual view such parts. So everything, all the motors, the fuselage, the cabin is all enclosed within this discus-shaped aircraft, and this was at least it was patented. It takes a bit to receive a patent. Inventors, they'll file for one, and sometimes they'll never receive a patent. But when it is, then they start looking for funds. And it makes me wonder if back in 1945, Mr. Alexander Wagers, we need to do a little more research on this guy, Alexander G. Wagers, if he actually was able to get this invention off the ground.
Now, I'm going to go a little off topic here, a little off the rails. This is a little... Okay, before I get into this story, I did notice one thing when I looked at every single one of these designs. And what I have noticed, and this leads me to believe that this is reversed alien technology. Rather, they may have added them before, a little after or whatever to stay within federal airspace guidelines.
That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up.
There are no perimeter lights on any of this. And
that's something that kind of I didn't notice that. I'm glad you were able to.
There are no perimeter lights. There's no lighting on any of these, and I don't think aliens have a use for it because they move so fast. They know where they're going. They don't need GPS. They say, "Fuck your Google Maps. We don't need any of this stuff." On a deeper note, let's see, 10:30 p.m., September 19th, 1961. Betty and Barney Hill were driving back to Portsmouth from a vacation in Niagara Falls in Montreal.
Hold on, is this Portsmouth, Ohio?
Montreal, it's around near Canada.
Go on.
Just south of Lancaster, New Hampshire. They claim to have observed a bright point of light in the sky that moved from below the moon and the planet Jupiter upward toward the west of the moon. While Barney navigated down U.S. Route 3, Betty reasoned that she was observing a falling star and it moved upward. Because it moved erratically and grew bigger and brighter, Betty urged Barney to stop the car to take a closer look, as well as to walk their dog. The dog's got to go potty. Delcy, that's the dog name. Barney stopped at a scenic picnic area just south of Twin Mountain. Betty, looking through the binoculars, observed an odd-shaped craft flashing multicolored lights traveling across the face of the moon. Because her sister had several years earlier said that she had been flying a flying saucer. She saw a flying saucer. Betty thought that might be what she was observing through the binoculars. What happened is they saw this object. They saw this craft in the sky. They saw this thing moving, and it descended towards their vehicle, causing Barney to stop in the middle of the highway. This huge silent craft covered about 80 to 100 feet, 24 to 30 meters above the hills. And they were sitting in their 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air, and it filled the entire field of view in the windshield. And it reminded Barney of a huge pancake. Carrying his pistol in his pocket, he stepped away from the vehicle and moved closer to the object. Using binoculars, Barney claimed to have seen 8 to 11 humanoid figures who were peering out of the aircraft's windows, seeming to just look at him in unison. All but one figure seemed to appear to be in a panel of the rear window of the hallway that encircled the front portion of the craft. The one remaining figure continued to look at Barney and communicated a message to him saying to stay where you are and keep looking. Barney had a recollection of observing the humanoid forms wearing glossy black uniforms and black caps. Red lights on what appeared to be bat wing fins began to telescope out of the sides of the craft, and a long structure descended from the bottom of the craft. The silent craft approached to what Barney estimated was about 50 to 80 feet overhead from him,
You said Batwing.
Yeah, he said that the beings were somehow not human. Now, after arriving home, the Hills stated that they had some odd sensation and impulses that they really couldn't explain. Betty insisted their luggage be kept near the back door rather than the main part of the house. Their watches would never work again. Barney said that the leather strap for his binoculars was torn, though he could not recall it tearing. The toes of his best dress shoes were scraped. Barney says he was compelled to examine his genitals in the bathroom, although he found nothing unusual. You got to check the boys, right? They took long showers to remove possible contamination, and each drew a picture of what they observed. Now, the Betty and Barney Hill story goes a lot deeper than that, but the drawing of what they saw matches up almost completely with one of the designs that you sent me in an email.
Which one was that?
It's the one at the very bottom. It's the page where it has like all the blue highlighted ones, and then there's one at the very bottom. So it has all the designs, and then it's like you sent it via text, which I thought was very interesting.
That wasn't the Russian EKIP.
Let me
have a look.
Let me look. Yeah, I couldn't find the text you sent. I have to go to my phone, and you're on the phone right now. Now, one of these patents you sent me, it's a United States patent, patent number US 11,891,177 Bravo 2. The date of this patent is February 6, 2024. And you know what?
Oh, yes.
I always thought that, the car I drive is an amazing vehicle, but how fucking cool would it be if it flew? Subaru Corporation in Tokyo has worked with the United States on developing UFOs.
In this case, it would be identified. We've identified one of the culprits here. And, a corporation like Subaru, it's an international corporation. I think they have beautiful cars. And to see, this is the most recent one that I came across. It was February 6th, 2024. A United States patent, not just a proposal, but an actual patent. Or the name of this is Disc Type Vertical Takeoff and Landing Aircraft by the Subaru Corporation out of Tokyo, Japan. Okay. And I emailed Subaru United States. The United States actually didn't know. They had no knowledge that this, because it's out of Tokyo, even existed within their realm of vehicles. But it is a disc type vertical takeoff and landing aircraft.
Well, and I think is a little bit shady is that if there's a U.S. patent on it, Subaru is 100% aware of this shit. Man, they're not going to tell us anything. I mean, this is some top secret shit.
Yeah. Well, they have an office out of Tokyo, Japan. They're just not letting the United States guys know. But I want to read the abstract for our audience. And from the original drawings, it's obviously it looks like you took your mom's saucer plate and flipped it upside down and put another one underneath it and just put two saucers together. That's why they're called flying saucers. As women would toss saucers at their misbehaving husbands back in the day. The abstract here for this flying saucer patented by Subaru on February 6, 2024 reads this: a disc type vertical takeoff and landing aircraft includes the following. A skirt widens towards the bottom. A disc-shaped rotor is positioned on the lower side of the skirt and rotates with relation to the skirt. A plurality of blades are provided standing on an upper surface of the rotor and are positioned radially from a center of the rotor. A cutout is formed in each of the plurality of blades. When the rotor rotates, centrifugal force causes an airflow along the blade rotating with the rotor. The airflow swirls in a spiral by a flow of air flowing over the cutout of the blade in a direction substantially orthogonal to the blade. The airflow flows in a radial direction of the rotor along the blade while swirling in the spiral, and the airflow ejected downward by the skirt causes ascending. So if that makes sense, let me put it in layman's terms. Pretty much what it's creating what is pretty much like a small, like, tornado underneath it, so it can lift as an aircraft. And that brings up, that kind of stokes other thoughts and theories. It actually stokes a theory in me, which these patents and these inventions, these documents, these are actually real. But also, if we want to continue an investigation, we do have to theorize sometimes. But this one is an interesting one, to see such a well-known company that creates vehicles actually patent this year, just February, March, this 3 months ago, is pretty kind of mind-blowing a little bit.
It is.
And it
is 100%. It's completely batshit. But you know what? If a company can develop this sort of thing, we kind of have to get, ahead of the bandwagon on this, because if we're working on it, then we know for sure that other countries are going to follow suit as well. And if this kind of technology is available, it would be to us, it would be available, but it would be a little difficult for the Soviets to reverse engineer this sort of stuff without the actual remnants of an actual alien or extraterrestrial UAP. So if we have access to a damaged UAP that was recovered, either a UFO, for those out there who don't know, if we have access to that and the Russians don't, then we're kind of ahead of the line, and so to speak, so developing this sort of technology. They could look up. And what's odd is that if this is reversed alien technology, why is it on Google? Why is it I can look this sort of stuff up? Is this just like, rough drafts of the gobbledygook of, like the stuff that they crumple up and throw in the trash? And this is just, their pre-trials of this type of aircraft? Or are the diagrams on here, are they actually working aircrafts? Because if it's working, I wouldn't think the government would want this published at all.
Yeah, that makes me wonder. I believe since most governments are based on Earth right now and within the confines of countries, they would have to legally apply for earthly patents, unless they were on the moon or on Mars.
They got a base on the moon for sure.
Well, then they wouldn't have to apply for earthly patents. Then they could just have their vessels come to Earth whenever, or they could drive their vessels, their all-terrain vessels, to Earth without Earth even knowing that these things exist.
That's very interesting. So, like, if you commit a crime in international waters, what's that old saying? Like, if you commit a crime in international waters, unless you're within so far of a country, it never happened or something. But like, if you're in outer space and you're making this sort of stuff, like on the moon, or if you're, if you're developing this sort of stuff off of Earth, then the laws don't apply.
It's a different jurisdiction.
That's interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think so. But these things that are being built on Earth, what is extraterrestrial? Let's get to the definition of that. Extraterrestrial is something or someone that's capable traversing out of the plane of Earth. And, when we talk about extraterrestrial aircraft, that doesn't mean that these things were built by aliens. There are human beings that potentially could be considered extraterrestrial because they do travel out of Terra or out of the plane of the Earth and come back. That's extraterrestrial. I don't know what I don't know if the human body or the biology or physiology would adapt to that over time, or how would it affect their children. But I believe there's a difference between an extraterrestrial person and an extraterrestrial aircraft, and one who it actually was not born on Earth and pilots a vessel that was not created on Earth. Does that make sense?
100%. And you know what stemmed from all this is from Mac Brazel. That's the 1947, that rancher that found the strange materials on his property and took the debris to a nearby military airbase, where it was evidence of a flying saucer. I believe other people were there at the time too and witnessed some of this stuff. But we'll definitely have to dive into, just do an entire episode on Roswell. Could make it like the part 2 and part 3 of this.
Yeah, that's definitely a research project I'd like to dig into. I don't know what they'd be willing to declassify it to this point, but our Freedom of Information Act request is probably the best that I can do. But there are public records. There are people, there are witnesses to talk to. It's kind of interesting, but let me backtrack just for a second here. I want sure. You were talking about the Russians or the Soviets.
Oh, sure. Yes.
During the Cold War, of course, there was definitely a lot of anxiety to produce cutting edge technology. They came up with this idea outside of the Cold War. Actually, there's a Russian aircraft known as EKIP. That's EKIP. It's a closed joint stock company. What EKIP is an aviation research and production center, also known as EKIP. And I really hope anyone listening to this will look at this vessel. It's an impressive aerial machine. From Moscow out of 2022, they proposed a new idea, and they actually created prototypes. There are photographs of not like city block sized EKIPs, but definitely regular sized aircraft. But they wanted to build city block sized EKIPs for transporting a mass amount of people. There was a new type of aircraft, EKIP. There's one line was L2-3. This was the leading example of the EKIP family of aircrafts.
And just let me give a quick little thing here. EKIP, for the listeners, means Ecology in Progress, and it was a Soviet and Russian project of multifunctional aerodome free aircraft built according to the flying wing scheme with elliptically shaped fuselage, also known by its Russian nickname, Tarakela, which means plate or saucer. EKIP can land on water, land, unpaved ground through the use of air cushion instead of a wheeled undercarriage. So, okay, go ahead. I just want to give them a quick rundown of.
No, anyways, there was Russian news coverage of this aircraft, and they not only wanted to produce it for commercial purposes, but also they used the word. What does this mean to you? Defense purposes for this cutting edge aircraft. What, in your opinion, Chris, if a nation and their Department of Defense or equivalent to Department of Defense had a line of, say, reserved aircraft for when there's nothing else a country could do. Would you deem it feasible that a country and their Defense Department and military would unleash a swarm of disc-shaped and or experimental flying saucers, for lack of better words?
Okay, so defense, well, let's look at, the definition of defense. It's to respond across the spectrum of conflict, including with credible force when required. This includes supporting regional partners in times of need and supporting civil authorities to respond and to recover from national and regional crises and disasters. So you want to be the biggest and baddest guy on the battlefield, and you want to be able to help people in other countries in their time of need and respond quickly. I believe that if you're moving at some of the speeds that some of this aircraft can move, you can get from point A to point B, which is another advantage to developing UFO technology, allowing for a faster travel time. Because time is everything. Time is money. And if you're not spending fuel, if you have extra room to build, you can tear out runways and be able to build more buildings, to be able to do more research. It primarily provides the military forces the needed to either deter war or to dominate it and to protect the security of our country. So that would be my thoughts on it.
That's great. Yeah. From everything I've seen, researched so far as well, I'd have to say that definitely of at least one of these, over, just from what I've collected, 120 flying saucer patents. I think it would be fair to say at least one has been created and duplicated, and probably not only for commercial or personal applications. That's how I feel about it. But yeah, this newest one, Subaru out of Japan, it's such an interesting one because it's so new, and everyone knows Subaru. So I think Subaru flying saucer out of 2024, as we're speaking right now, it's May 13th, is definitely one we need to look into. It kind of puzzles me why the American division of Subaru claims that they have no record or no knowledge that this exists, although it's not secret. That's interesting to me. Though what we are seeing here, we're seeing a large influx and acceptance of disc-shaped drones or quadcopters, etc. So it's kind of the lead up to society accepting a commercialized flying saucer for personal.
Could you imagine
services.
Looking at the horizon and seeing like 500 of these discs just like coming over the horizon? It would be like the Native Americans first seeing a ship, not knowing what a ship was, coming over the top of the ocean. They stood there. A Native American, an Indian, had to have stood there, either be Shawnee or whatever, or Navajo. They stood there on the edge of the ocean, and they looked out, and they saw a ship, and they're like, I don't even have to ask the question. I already know what they were thinking. They're thinking, what in the living heck is that? It would be the same scenario with us, except automatically the human race would automatically think that's a freaking Martian invasion. With a lot of these designs that I'm looking at here, we have to think about the G-forces that this sort of thing would put on your body. To do a 90-degree turn going 800 to, I don't know how, it has to, how fast was the Tic Tac whenever they tagged it? when they finally marked it and they were able to keep up with the Tic Tac, the famous Tic Tac video, how fast was it going? Like 800 kilometers an hour, 800 miles per hour, 600. But to be able to do a 90-degree turn, that would smash the human body into the wall, and it would make your brain implode. Your eyes would come out of your head. So I'm thinking, they have to include, a lot of this stuff that's in the diagrams, I don't think includes the G-force applied to the human body when it comes to flying in one of these things. Plus, it's got to be limited capacity.
I'm not sure about the Tic Tac scenario.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to send SEAL Team 6 in one of these things, or Delta Force. You're only going to be able to send like maybe 1 or 2 people, because weight is, mass has weight. And if you have a 3 or 4 or even 5 185 to 205 pound people in there, you're going to have to compensate for a little over 1,000 pounds of human meat that's going to be flying through the air, and then doing a 90-degree, like going straight, and then pow, a 90-degree turn would completely obliterate your body. You would come out of that freaking aircraft with all kinds of serious health issues, if not dead.
Yeah, the original pilot of the Rolls-Royce, what the heck was that thing called? The thing looked like, they called it a flying bedstead. The Rolls-Royce flying bedstead thing was crazy. All right. Really interesting looking. And NASA now uses it to train astronauts for moon landing. Who's listening to this, check out Rolls-Royce flying bedstead. The guy, a year after he was the first pilot, died of health issues. But you're talking about the trajectory of the Tic Tac and like how fast these things are capable of going. I want to read from Russia's EKIP business plan for the L2-3. At the Aviation Research Center and Production Center, EKIP, specialists from the aviation and rocket and space industries have developed the fundamental principles and fundamentally new aircraft, EKIP. All right, and here's the speeds, right? Capable of flying at speeds of 500 to 610 kilometers an hour at altitudes of 8 up to 11.5 kilometers. Flying in a chronolet, I don't know what that word means, at speeds, flying in a chronolet speeds up to 300 to 400 kilometers an hour and move on an air cushion. The max speed for the Russia's EKIP, at least in 2002, what they were wanting to achieve, which more than likely they did because they receive a crap load of funding from their nuclear industry, they wanted to achieve flying speeds for the EKIP up to 610 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
Is that fast? I think that's pretty fast, man.
Yeah, that's yes, that's extremely fast.
Yeah.
We are going to pause here. That is part 1 of Operation Silverbug with Bobby Vaughn to a Call to Actions podcast. Join us next week for part 2, where we finish up this topic. Again, I'd like to thank Bobby Vaughn for coming on. The guy is brilliant, man. I love his episodes. I love his content. Please go follow him and check out his content. If you guys have questions or concerns, please shoot me an email at secretcircuspod@gmail.com. That's secretcircuspod@gmail.com. We are found on Twitter at Secret Circus Pod, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podbean, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Thank you guys for listening. Part 2 next week. I love you guys. Stay blessed. And as always, keep looking to the skies.